Hi, if anybody who comes across this video, I'll just explain what it's intended for. It isn't intended as a video of a presentation that can be given online. It's purely intended as a way of gathering thoughts together prior to a presentation in person to Southport Scientific Society. It also enables me to get the timing right and to share a few ideas with people prior to the presentation. A further use will be once I've done the presentation, people can refer back to this online talk. A lot more detail on here. The actual presentation will be much shorter. It's intended to be a fairly informal, fun evening, as opposed to a formal presentation where we're trying to educate people. Hi, I'm Dave Sutton and welcome to this talk on AI. It's more than a talk, it's actually a demonstration of AI. So what you'll be seeing is a demonstration of a lot of the features and facilities of AI. So for example, if we look at the image here, this image has been created by AI. There's some digital art gone into it, but predominantly it's an image created by AI. And it's a very significant image because it actually covers a Go game in 2017. But rather than explain to you about the Go game, I think what we'll do, we'll use a little bit of AI. Hi, can you explain the significance of the AlphaGo tournament in 2017?
The AlphaGo tournament in 2017 was a landmark event in artificial intelligence. AlphaGo, developed by DeepMind, defeated the world's top Go player, KG. This victory showcased the potential of AI in mastering complex tasks and was a significant milestone in AI development. It's considered a breakthrough in demonstrating AI's capabilities in fields requiring intuition and strategic thinking.
A youth from China, calm and bright. Across the grid, a robot waits. No breath, no blink, just silent fates. One move ahead, then two, then more. The crowd leaned in, the world kept score. Not just a match, but something new. A race began, none could undo. This was the sport, the silent call. Of stones that shook us all. From ancient minds, the circuits bold. The future stirred in black and gold.
I let that run for a little time just to allow you to some time to maybe read the words and listen to the music and see how well they work together. The way I produced this was that what I tend to do quite often is start with a storyline when I'm doing a piece of work, and from that I develop a scenario and then start to either build robots or to do artwork. In this particular case, I started with this image, and from the image I used AI to help me to generate a story. I then took the story and then used AI to condense it right down and produce a poem. Then took the poem and said we want the poem to be used as part of a song supporting the image. So can AI then turn the poem into lyrics? Once I got the lyrics, I then used a totally different type of AI which you can use to generate songs. I took the lyrics, put them into the song generator, and it generated a song. Not only did it do that, but it also generated an image. And the image could be used on maybe the front of a cover from an album, for example. So all this was done using AI, and it's probably been around at this sort of level maybe 6 months or a year, so it's all fairly new, but it works really well and it represents illustrates the capabilities of AI. I'll start to move on fairly rapidly now. So what you're seeing here now is how I generated the first cut of a plan for this talk. The plan's on the right hand side, and on the left hand side is really sort of a brain dump where I'm just writing down all the things that possibly I could include in a talk. I give that to AI and it comes up with a plan, and it's as simple as that. 3 weeks ago we had a great talk from Alan Davis on women in coal mines, and what I wanted to do was to illustrate how you can use PowerPoint, which is what I'm using at the moment, to generate presentations. Now, I haven't used this at all to create this presentation that I'm working on now, and it's only recently that I've got this version of PowerPoint. I'm not sure how long it's been able to do this type of thing. I think it's fairly new. So what I've asked it to do, can it create an image of women working underground in coal mines in the UK? And can also produce a list of key dates that impacted women working in these mines. And it came up with the image you can see here. And it's also given me some key dates. But if you look at the highlighted areas there and the key dates, these are all references. If you click on those, it'll actually take you to the website where you can find a lot more information. So just from that line at the top, it's produced this. I'll just flip through now and then you'll be able to see what else it's produced. I won't talk through this, I'll just let you have a look at the slides. I wanted to produce an image to present to you about a talk at a forum. It's a BCSIT leadership group, which I'm going to cover in a short while. But first of all, I wanted to show you this image. When I first asked it to do it, it produced the same presenter, but the audience were all white, fairly elderly males. I then asked it to show far more females and get a better balance, so it did that, but again they all seem to be white. Then I said, well, can you give a mixed nationality? So it came up with this one. Most times I ask it to do things nowadays, it tends to give a mixed group of people, but every so often it takes a bias, so it assumes that people of a certain type are in a certain audience or in a certain category. And you need to be very careful of this when you start to use it. And very often what you might do is say, well, I need a different gender mix or a different nationality mix, and more or less force it down those lines. Each year, the British Computer Society hold an IT Leaders Forum symposium this year. It's on the 13th of November. It just so happens it's on the same day that I'm giving the talk to Southport Scientific Society. And what they do in advance of this, they ask for IT leaders to propose areas that should be a priority for the following year. And then they select a number to take forward. This year, I've been selected to take a proposal forward. I think there's 6 being covered this year. I'm covering leadership in strategic AI delivery. Now, I don't normally do this, so this is the first time that I've actually done a presentation for them. So I won't go through the slides in any detail. I'll just leave them available for anybody to look at. I'll just explain how these few slides were created. I only had about a day to do this. I'd actually sent the BCS a couple of briefing papers. And briefing papers actually originated from this talk that we're giving today, because what I was trying to do was to provide a demonstration of how you could do something quite serious using AI. And then it grew and it grew, and eventually I ended up with a number of briefing papers, which have now been incorporated into this talk. But I sent the briefing papers to the BCS, and then I had a message back that there was an IT Leaders Forum, a symposium, and a number of people are going to present at the symposium, and could I produce some slides for that talk, and if possible go down and do the talk itself. Well, I couldn't go down, but somebody offered to do the talk on my behalf. So what I've done, I've created the slides and also created some presentation notes to go with it. Now, it's quite a complex area, so actually producing slides which you could use as a presentation of this type was quite difficult in the timescales that I had. So what I did, I more or less completed a presentation of sorts, but did it in a Word document rather than in PowerPoint. And the rationale behind that was that I could then use AI to reformat it and make sure that it was fit for purpose. But it couldn't just take the slides. What I needed to do was give it a lot more information. So then I took 4 briefing papers that I'd produced for the BCS and loaded those into AI, and then also gave it the presentation, and I said, based on those 4 briefing papers and the presentation I put together, can you come up with a better stylized presentation? Which it did. I then needed to produce some briefing notes for the person who was going to present it. So again, I wrote this all out in Word, all the details of what I wanted to do, gave that to AI and said, can you do this in a better fashion than I can? Now, I'm slightly dyslexic, so I can do presentations fine, but it does take me a long time to put them together. Using AI, I could do it a lot more rapidly. So I now had a presentation pack, only 4 slides, but over quite a complex area, and I also had some presenters' notes. The problem was they didn't actually tie together too well. So I then gave it both. I gave it the presentation pack and I gave it the briefing notes, presenters' notes. And I said, can you incorporate those two together, amalgamate them together, and produce a new set of briefing notes that align well with the presentation pack, which it did. And that's what I then put into PowerPoint. Actually, put it into PowerPoint was very simple, because then it was just a matter of cutting and pasting. Let's move on to another presentation of a totally different type. What I'm going to do now is we're going to have a talk about cats. So what I wanted to start off by doing was using AI to imagine myself giving a talk to yourselves at Southport Scientific Society, which we see here, and we can just see a presentation of a cat. So let's start this talk about cats. So let's start with our talk on cats. What we're going to do is create a prompt for AI to create a story based on cats. This is the prompt. Can you finish this short story? Southport Scientific Society are listening to a talk when a strange cat falls through the ceiling. It splits in two, with a live cat falling onto Alice's lap and a dead cat falling onto Bob's. So I've now copied the prompt into Llama, which is an application that runs on my laptop. I can run on the desktop, which has an AI model inside it. So you can download different AI models. The one I've downloaded is quite a large one. It's got 20 billion parameters in it, so pretty large. The ones that run on the internet in trillions of parameters, but this one is purely running on my desktop at the moment, but it will run on my laptop, and there's no internet connection at all. So the thing that I'm showing you here is something that's literally running on a desktop with no outside access at all, And what it's doing now, it's thinking about the question, and it's determining how to develop a story. So it's looking at different options. And because we're in Southport Scientific Society, as far as the prompt is concerned, and we're talking about cats, it'll start to consider things like Schrodinger's cat and entanglement and all those scientific relationships to a cat. But it'll also start to consider things like, is this supposed to be a comedic tale? Is it supposed to be a scientific tale? And it'll look at different options. Now, it does take quite some time, but what you can see here now is the actual thinking process. So the key thing for me, as I mentioned, is that this is running on my laptop. And if this can run on my laptop today, and if we consider that AI is very much in its infancy, then what's going to happen in 5 to 10 years' time? Will we be able to run very, very large general AI models on small devices, such as a mobile phone or on a laptop? Which means that there won't be the same necessity to access the internet all the time to get information, because we can run quite sophisticated models on smaller devices. And certainly if we're starting to look at specific AI models for a particular purpose, like a scientific purpose or a medical purpose, then we will be able to run those on smaller machines that may not need access to these very large data centers that are running in the cloud. So what it's doing now, it's continuous to think. So it usually takes quite a long time. It can take a couple of minutes of thinking before it comes to an end. And we should be coming to an end now of the thinking process. You can see what it's doing. Alice hugs the cat. It's weird. The cat mews. The dead cat is still. So we can see it's sort of making up this story, and it's starting to pull it all together, and it's getting closer and closer to a storyline. What it doesn't do is just search the internet for pieces of a story which it can find from elsewhere. I'm starting to craft it now. I think the last time I did this, it was something like 200 seconds of thinking time, and then it's very fast to produce the story. What you find with most AI assistants is that you ask them to do a story and it instantaneously comes back. That's because it's running on the cloud with very massive processors, and it makes no attempt to give you any indication about what it's thinking about. There are a few language models that are certainly used in science which do actually give you the thinking process, and it also tells you where it's picking up all the information from, which enables you then to go back and verify the sources of the information and determine if those sources are the types of things you were looking for. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes on most AI models. So this one, I say, is just using one model. And now it's starting to write the story. A lot of the AI assistants which people are familiar with, such as Copilot and ChatGPT, what they're doing is using models, but they might not just use one model, they might use a number of models. And it can be extremely complex. And also they've got another layer of filtering and complexity on top of the actual model it's using. So this is a fairly simple way of doing this. And by the way, this model isn't designed to write stories. It's designed as a general model. This is just one thing I decided to do. So you can see it running now, and I think we'll just leave it there now. What I'm demonstrating here is how simple it is to create your own AI assistant. And in this case, what I'm looking to do is create an AI assistant which is peculiar to me. It's things I want to do and things I know about. And on this case, advise me whether I should go cycling or not. So what you do is you create what's called an agent, and it's more like a matter of clicking and pointing. You don't need any technical knowledge. You don't need to do any programming. So you tell it which AI model you're going to use. In this case, it's going to use Google Gemini, which is quite a well-known model. I'm then going to add into that certain things that I want. So we're going to add in my to-do list from Microsoft, my calendar, which is from Google, so my Google Calendar, an online weather forecasting software, and also a news platform. And what I can do, I can query all these. Now this is very much a training example, so a little video there explaining how to do it all, but it does create a real application. And what you can do as you start to create more complex ones is create a number of agents which all talk to each other. But for a very simple case, all I'm going to do is in this case just ask it whether it's going to be raining in Southport today, and you can see the response in the left hand side corner there. And the message line there, I can type anything in there, maybe related to what's happening today, what do I need to do, what's on my to-do list, and what's on my calendar. I can also then, we can start to create agents which look at that, maybe some information about my cycle routes, and determine if it's going to rain. It'll look at my cycle routes. It'll also look at my calendar and email me a message if it's going to rain today, and maybe do something about it. And I can set that up for a point in time, so I can say at 6 o'clock every morning, have a look at my calendar, see what I'm doing, have a look at the weather forecast. If it looks like it's going to be a bit iffy in terms of the weather, then send me a message. And it'll also be looking at my routes and saying maybe don't go on this long route, it would be advisable to go on a shorter route. This is just a quick slide that's been produced again using AI. I've been using Microsoft Copilot, and it's about Microsoft. So what Microsoft are producing at the moment and the latest technologies to do with AI. And basically they've got a whole family of different things which enable businesses to create new business systems, create all the data behind it, monitor everything that's going on, and enable users to look at maybe business intelligence, such as what's happening in a certain region as far as all the salesmen are concerned, who's done the best sales, why have we got a dip in certain areas. Now that's always been available, but what you can do now is AI can help to produce those systems very, very quickly. But this is far more interesting. What this is, we've got a user there, and she's actually talking to the screen. So she'll talk to an AI screen and say, can you produce a graph of the Salesforce and what's happening within a certain region? And it'll come up with a graph. She can then start to talk to the data saying, oh, based on that data, it looks like there's a problem in such a place. Can you advise me what's likely to have caused the problem? Or what should we do about the problem? And AI will respond. And this can be just a verbal conversation. So she could be typing it in, or she can just be using a microphone and speakers. And it's a conversation with the screen, analysing what's happening in a business. And this is all readily available now. It's in its early days, but all of this technology is there, and what we call the ecosystem. And in Microsoft terms, it's called Fabric. So the Fabric ecosystem is already there, and it enables you to do this. So another example, I was asked to if I could do a talk, and I think it was mentioned to me, could I do a talk on robotics? And I said, well, I don't really know that much about robotics. I do actually build robots. I build DIY small robots at home. So what I thought I'd do is give you a demonstration of AI and how AI can help you to build a robot. So basically what I've done, I've taken some computer parts and robotics parts which I brought with me, listed all those, and just said to AI, can you design a sophisticated robot using the following components? Now I know quite a few of these components you can actually run AI on. You can only run AI vision, but I've got at least 3 of the components you can use to do AI vision. So for example, the AI vision would allow the robot to see a human, and then for example, the robot could follow the human around, so it'd identify it as a person and then follow it around. So it starts off by giving me a core architecture, which is all the different things like a central brain and the sensors and vision systems. Gives me all the components. All these are based on things I've already told it that I want to use, that I know will work and you can develop a robot from. and it tells me the role. And then there's lots of other information which I haven't included explaining how to do all of this. And then I've asked it to create a little schematic diagram at the side, which it's done for me. And here you can see the robot on the right hand side. I've also asked it to produce some computer code, and this is code which is used for computer vision. So it can actually produce computer code as well, in addition to telling you how to build the robot and giving you schematic diagrams for it. Okay, I'm not going to spend much time on this. I've given a few talks to the youth array on Industry 4 and how Industry 4 will impact the current problems we've got. So if you take the current problems I've got population, aging, equality, discrimination, the environment, climate change, viruses and war. And then we look at all the components of Industry 4. And these things are what you see coming through now. And if we take, this is Industry 4, Industry 3 was the digital age, but it's what you call an industrial change. Industrial change is when you've got lots of components all coming together at the same time, which have a significant impact. And we've got smart cities, blockchain, genomics, Internet of Things, where we've got loads of physical devices and robotics hanging off the internet rather than just internet sites. We've got automation, including robotics. We've got AI, and this is all the different types of AI, and we've got the gig economy. And this is a diagram I produced, and I used to use it fairly frequently. And I'd also talk about some major advancements here that are going on. And the key one, which you might have heard on the news, is a thing called AlphaFold, where AlphaFold is coming up with proteins. So when a protein folds, there's only so many options where it's stable. An AlphaFold will actually give you it'll come up with the options which are stable. So this is the latest diagram. So I've only changed two things really. I've got rid of all of my advancements and I've put AI in there. And this is the AI to do with neural networks and generative AI. The key thing about it is that it represents the way the human brain works. So there were two types of people working on it, two types of scientists working on it. One group of scientists were trying to understand the human brain and learn from the way that an AI algorithm or computer would work. And the other group of people were trying to develop AI machines that could mirror the way that a human brain worked. And that's come together to create the AI we're talking about here and we're talking about today. The only other thing I've changed is I've included a thing called social media at the top. So there's a massive significance of social media, which I'm sure everybody's aware of. What I'd like to do now is to illustrate how we can use AI to analyze information, analyze data. And what I'm doing, I'm taking the first image from the top row on the slide we just looked at, which is the problems, and the problem that we're talking about is population, and probably the next image talks about an aging population. So I'm taking that scenario as a problem and trying to understand the statistics and the information around it. Now, it's quite a complicated problem to understand, and there's a lot of statistics involved. So what I've done, I've asked AI to analyze the available information and plus some assumptions that I've made. And the assumptions I'm making are that the fertility rate, which is very low at the moment, will continue to decline over the next 10 years. But it won't be declining by a lot, just a gradual decline. The mortality rate will stay as it is. And the net migration will drop to 100,000 over the next 5 years. I picked 100,000 because that was the latest information I could find on a published figure. It was published by the last government. And then asked AI to work through the figures and draw a graph. So it's given me a lot of detail supporting this graph, but basically what the graph is showing is that the population in the UK will grow up to 2000, up to around 2000, from 68 million to approaching 71 million, and then it'll decline, to 63 million. But this is over 200 years, so we're talking about a long period there. But on the other side, what I'm looking at then is the percentage of working people in the population, and that declines very quickly. From the current figure of virtually 70%, and it will actually declined to 35%. In fact, the steepest decline is between now and 2100. So we've got a mixed issue here. We've got a declining percentage of people that are working age, and we've got an increasing population. So it's just showing what you can do with AI to analyse figures and just to try and get a better handle on what's happening. I'm just going to leave you now to listen to two talks. There's nothing fake about this. Basically what I've been doing is working for some time with an open conversation with AI. And by open I mean every time you give a prompt to AI, you can start a new conversation. And what you can do is leave a conversation open or reopen it at a later date. I've had conversations running for many months, and AI understands these conversations, and I'm just asking it questions now based on the work we've been doing together.
Hi David, what's on your mind today?
Can you provide Patrick Hurley with some details about the work we've been doing on AI SDO?
Sure, David. For Patrick Hurley, AISDO, or the AI Strategy Delivery Organisation, is a groundbreaking UK initiative aimed at transforming infrastructure and public services through AI. It's leading the charge in sectors like water, electricity and health, promoting intelligent infrastructure delivery. It's not just about tech, it's a cultural shift towards seeing AI as a core discipline. Would you like more details on its scope or impact?
If you can just go through in a little bit more detail on the scope.
Sure thing. AISDO focuses on transforming the UK's infrastructure with ethical AI. It covers water and electricity sectors fully, focusing on strategy, diagnostics and innovation. For the NHS and local authorities, it supports infrastructure systems like hospitals and transport. It's not just tech, it's about a cultural shift, seeing AI as a core discipline. The goal of intelligent, ethical infrastructure delivery.
Can we now provide Patrick with a little bit more details about Southport Innovation Centre and the objectives and design we've been working on?
Absolutely, David. The Southport Innovation Centre is envisioned as a hub for creativity, learning and cross-disciplinary collaboration, connecting AI, art and STEAM. It aims to empower communities with skills for future industries, emphasising inclusivity and ethical AI. The design includes maker spaces, workshops and digital labs, fostering innovation, ethical AI practices and community engagement. Would you like to dive deeper into any specific aspect?
No, I think that's fine. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, David. Have a great day. Welcome back, David. What can we dive into today?
Can you provide a synopsis for Patrick Hurley, our local MP, on the work that we've been doing at the Innovation Centre, including the development of a physical innovation centre and also AISDO?
Patrick, we've been spearheading groundbreaking projects at the Southport Innovation Centre. We're creating a hub that blends AI, art and technology to foster innovation. This includes a plan for a physical space that showcases cutting-edge technologies and provides educational opportunities. We've also developed the AISDO proposal, a national framework for ethical AI integration in UK infrastructure. This proposal has significant implications for the UK's leadership in AI and is set to be presented to UK leaders. It's a pivotal moment for innovation in our country.
That's fine. Could you provide just a little bit more detail about Southport Innovation Centre?
Absolutely, Patrick. The Southport Innovation Centre is all about combining AI, art and tech to foster creativity and learning. We're developing a physical space to showcase cutting-edge tech and provide educational opportunities. The Innovation Centre is leading projects like the AISDO proposal, aiming to integrate ethical AI in UK infrastructure. It's a dynamic hub for innovation in our region and beyond.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So I'll just go through the Innovation Centre and explain what it is and how it works. So originally it was set up, it was going to be set up as a physical space within the Wayfarers Arcade linked to the engine room. It was only going to be fairly small, and the idea was that we'd have a number of stations that people could work at and have cross-fertilisation of ideas. But you could also have people starting at any age. So, for example, if a parents came in with younger children, then they would be directed to information and applications they could use, maybe to learn about AI. So there's a lot of materials out there on the web, training materials for children, such as machine learning for kids, where you can go in and use simple applications and children can learn all the different types of AI and do it in a fun way. There's lots of robotics information on here. So if you want to build a robot, all the robotics kit would be available for people. If you want to do electronics and AI, again, all the kit would be available for people to use. And then there'd be lots of online materials, and there'd be links in the Innovation Centre repository to how to get appropriate courses and advice and guidance on what to do. It's grown over time now, so the repository itself is extremely large, covering a wide area of things, which I'm going to cover in a short while. The idea about creating a physical innovation centre, we've sort of built on that and come up with a number of scenarios while we're waiting to initiate something within the Wayfarers Arcade, which probably isn't going to happen now because of the changing circumstances within Southport. I'll leave it there now and show you a little bit more about the repository we're going to use and how you use it. So we've had some early talks with Kathmandu University, and the reason for discussing things with Kathmandu is they're very progressive in the use of STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art and maths, and they're now looking at the introduction of AI. And my original ideas around how to develop the Innovation Centre came from a TED talk that was done by Kathmandu University. So I've been discussing how we could work, or we've been discussing how we can work together on certain aspects of the development of STEAM education, or STEAM plus AI education. So I just want to go through some of the things that we've been looking at. And if you look here now on the drop-down list, so there's a lot of information actually on the site. So if we look at the teachers, I'm actually looking at AI plus STEAM. One of the areas, I won't go through much of this at all, but one of the areas we've been looking at in particular, or I've been looking at in particular, is the use of AI in schools. And one of the key things there, one of the key applications is then called Magic School. So I'll just go through now and explain to you the significance of Magic School. So Magic School is one of the leading applications in the world of AI for teachers and for students, and it's used right across the world. It's a little bit more difficult to introduce into the UK because it tends to work with a syllabus, and the UK hasn't got that much flexibility, but it's something that we can easily introduce outside of the school curriculum, or it can be integrated, but it needs a little bit more thought. It would certainly work very well with an innovation centre. Each of these little rectangles here, I know it's very difficult to see, but each small rectangle there is a different tool set, a different AI tool set. And on the left hand side we've got the tools for teachers, on the right hand side we've got the tools for pupils. Now there's actually about twice as much as this, so this is just an example. And if you look at it and what's available week by week, it's changing constantly. So as AI is evolving, so the applications are evolving. But one of the key things I've been looking at is lesson plans. So it will help you to develop a lesson plan irrespective of the subject. So I can come up with a brand new subject and look at this and say, can we design a lesson plan around it? It starts to ask about which country we're in, which curriculum do we need to fit into, how do I integrate it into current lesson plans, because it's got a lot of lesson plans around science and mathematics. And if I'm talking about AI, it'll integrate what I'm doing with one of those lesson plans. But there's lots and lots of tools you can use there. So there's quite a lot of information about the use of applications such as Magic School, but also a lot of the things you can do with Magic School you can do with Copilot, which is what we're using today, and I can actually generate lesson plans with Copilot. And one of the things I was looking at was, well, how do we integrate this with an innovation centre? Or how do you integrate it with after school activities? And there's a lot of information on how to do this, but this is just one slide. So it actually looks at how things can be put together. And I've used AI along this conversation. So there's a long conversation with AI, pulling together how all this could work well together. So we're looking at things for educators, students, makers, artists, and the general community. And then it's pulling out a tool set for each one and looking at the outcome. So if you look at educators, for example, we've got Magic School, we've got Copilot, and we've got the Innovation Lab. So it's integrating all the things that I'm covering today. If I look at students, we've then got Scratch, which is an application which is covered, the whole section on Scratch on the Innovation Centre website. There's machine learning for kids, where children can learn about AI at any level. Teachable machines, similar type of thing for teaching children at any level about AI. And then we've got Sonic Pi, which I'll be covering later, which is all about music and how AI can generate music. So if you follow this, you'll find that each of the applications here is covered on the website, on the Southport Innovation website. So really, this didn't really start as a serious conversation with AI. It started off, I wanted to create a story. Now, very often I'll start to create stories, and very often they'll morph into a different direction, or they'll grow in size. What's happened here is I was listening to the news and I was thinking about AI, and I was also considering maybe a story about the early days of the Earth, when early creatures were first formed. And then what I was considering was, well, what happened if it was all created by two beings that came from space? And one was called A and one was called I. And the idea behind it is A believes in kindness, sharing and helping others, where I believes in strength, competition and keeping secrets. And then over time, the creatures on Earth start to evolve, and they have a combination of A and I. And when humans come onto the scene, again, they've got a combination of A and I, but some groups are biased towards A and other groups are more biased towards I. And then I started to think about the ethics involved, and it forms into a story, and from the story and the legend we can then start to create activity sheets using student plans, and we could use Magic School, or we could use Copilot together with Magic School, or on its own. So what you see here is just a very small portion of an activity sheet. And if you look at number 2 here, it's got things on it such as if you learn something cool, do you share it with everybody or keep it secret? Yeah, and then you choose, is this an A or an I? And we can do the same thing. You build a robot. Do you make it to help your whole class, or do you use it to only help yourself? So is this an A or an I? Yeah. So basically, we've got this concept of A's and I's, and we're starting to look at culture. The significance of this is I'll start to use this later on and create what's called a cultural hub, but we'll look at that later. So this is just the start of an idea. It's not very firm. I'm just playing around with ideas. What I want to do now is just to explain the significance of the A and I scenario and their use within AI itself. So what I've done, I've taken the story of the birth of AI and uploaded it into a Copilot prompt. And then I've just said, can you explain any cultural or ethical differences between Copilot and Grok? Grok is the Elon Musk XAI alternative to Microsoft's Copilot. And what it does, it gives basically a rundown of the differences between them. And they're very different. So if you just look at the summary table, it says there's a cultural tone difference where Copilot is professional, neutral, and enterprise focused, where Grok is witty, rebellious, open, sometimes edgy. The ethical stance, Copilot's got strict filtering and compliance and privacy, where Grok is minimal filtering and open to controversy. And it's intentionally designed that way. And if you look at the audiences, the Copilot is designed for the enterprise, regulated industries, and it uses the Microsoft 365 ecosystem, whereas Grok gets a lot of its information from social media and is intended for social media users, tech enthusiasts, and a lot of the information comes from X and Twitter and real-time chat data. And then further down, it just says, it mentions the birth of AI and how that ties into the conversations about culture and bias. And then at the end, it says, would you like a deeper dive into these differences and how they might impact your specific use cases, or a visual summary? So just to re-emphasize, it's really important that you know the biases of any search engines you use, and you can actually provide an extra level of cultural bias and ethics into any types of search you're doing. And things like the educational systems and Magic School have a very, very strong ethical content involved in the answers to queries. So I'll come back to the last topic later on, and you'll see how significant it is. What I'm going to do now is talk about the Innovation Centre itself. So this was a very long-running conversation with AI. What I started with was a concept of a showcase. So very often when you're travelling around to other countries and you seem to see science showcased as part of art, so you get an amalgam of art and science. And I always look at these things and say, well, if you really took the latest science, you could do something a little bit more interesting. Not all the time, but sometimes I think, well, the science side isn't that strong. So what I've done, I've started to look at a showcase and developing a showcase that sits inside an innovation centre. And I say the conversation is very large, so you'll notice there it drops down and it says what we need to do is have, I think there's 8 conversations, long ongoing conversations looking at various aspects of how we develop this showcase and how we develop an innovation centre. I'll go through the detail a little bit more later. But also I'm thinking about, well, if I'm going to promote this, how do I generate an executive summary? How do I generate advertising campaigns? How do we get funding for this? When we start to think of the innovation centre, what types of innovation centre are we going to develop? Are we just looking at one innovation centre, or are we going to look at something smaller which will fit into a community centre or in a school? Are we going to start to look at things like an innovation centre in a box, which is basically a bare bones kit which you can just give to anybody, and then they've got all of the tools they need, but they'll just go online to use the innovation centre hub to enable them to develop using this innovation kit. So there's lots of ideas there, and we're working at all different levels, from deep technical level of developing a showcase and developing the various aspects of innovation centre rooms, and then we're going to start to look at this from a business perspective.
Drifting far beyond the stars, past the edge of known charts, silent signals, glowing scars, hope beats in its metal heart. Through the dark it sails alone, call, new worlds arise. It crossed the void, it dared the fall. Now light surrounds the Voyager's soul.
Okay, I'll let that run for a while then, just so to have a little bit of a break and you could listen to some of the music. The key point about this is that this is the showcase, and what I'm using AI to do now is to explore different avenues, but also to verify my ideas about how all this would work. So I'm basing it on technology I'm fairly familiar with. So the idea behind it is this: what we have is we have some globes that represent planets, and I started off with the idea that what we can do is we can take a spaceship and move it around. So somebody's holding this spaceship, it can be on a pole or whatever. As they move near the planets are magnetic, so the magnetic fields alter the screen that you can see there. But also we have people that can move around, so we can use gesture control as well. So that's another fairly straightforward thing to do. But rather than just change the image on the screen, what we're doing is we've got lights moving around, and those are based on a thing called the EL wire. We can do it any other way, different ways. Again, it's fairly well-known technology. But the really different thing is that as people move and change the gestures, or we move the spaceship flying through, then the screen will change and we'll actually fly through the universe. And at the same time, the words or the lyrics of a song will change. So the lyrics of the song are changing as well. And also we've got the song in the background that we can change. So everything's working in unison. And then over and above that, we've got the sound of a spaceship going through the universe. And there's a theme to this and a story around it where the spaceship is flying through the universe. It goes through a black hole and it comes out the other side, and it finds a whole new life on the other side. And that's what this song is about. So if you listen to the song, it actually covers all of that. But we'll see all this evolving as people are moving the gestures and moving their arms around in certain directions, or maybe moving a robot. And what I need to do now is understand all of the electronics around this, all the computer code around it, and to make sure it all works. So what I've been doing with AI is, this conversation's gone on for some time, but when I discuss the types of code I want to use, and make sure it's in a language that I understand. So very often it might be using a language I'm less familiar with. So I said, oh, rather than using that computer language, can you use this one? And processing is one that I'm fairly familiar with for doing artwork. So I'll say, if we want to change the sound and align that with what's happening on the screen, can we use the processing language? And it'll actually give me the code to do that, and also cover all the other aspects. So I've talked a little bit about the process of creating the showcase, and what we need to do is understand how it'll all work, how the electronics works, how all the AI works, how it all comes together. And that is more of an engineering approach. So we need to design all that from an engineering perspective and an AI perspective. But over and above that, we also need to start to think about the innovation centre. So what's it going to entail? You know, is it going to be a group of rooms? And what's going to happen in those rooms? What sort of who are we aiming it at? Or is it going to be children? Is it going to be adults? What age groups are we looking for? What are we going to be doing in each room? So the conversation now moves on to the innovation centre itself, with the showcase there you can see at the front, and then we can see a diagram of a number of rooms and people walking around. Now this has been produced by AI based on the conversation of what we're going to put in each room, and who's going to be the target audience for this. So who do we expect to come through the door and use all these facilities? And purely from that, it's created the picture. So I've not described the picture to it. I've said, can you create a picture of the innovation centre based on all of our conversations? It then moves on to things like, well, we've got a diagram here. Well, now let's consider all the different aspects of the innovation centre. And I'll just let that run through now, so you can see the various elements of it and basically what it's come up with. So I'm not going to spend much time going through it. So we see all the hall rooms here. It gives the age groups of the people that we expect in the different rooms, and it also gives me a complete breakdown of all the facilities. There's a lot of background information about all of this. It's not quite complete, this diagram, but this is an early diagram. There's tremendous amounts of information about supporting this. And here we just see two posters again. This is right at the end of very long conversation that's been going on for months, and it comes out with two other different types of innovation centre now. So we've got the innovation centre, which is a town-wide showcase, and then we've got the smallest type of innovation centre, which is the innovation centre in a box, where individuals are given a box with all of the building blocks in there and information telling them how they can actually do things, how they can enhance their innovation capabilities using the innovation centre online hub and access it. So we don't actually need a physical innovation centre in this particular case, and we go through different scenarios, and these are just two of the scenarios and two posters that have been produced based on the conversations. And just the final diagram. This is an early mind map showing you how everything fits together. So what this slide shows is some Sonic Pi code. Now, when we're designing the showcase, one of the things that we need in there is to show music that alters as a spaceship flies through space. So as we move something towards the planets, which are all magnetic, it recognises where the spaceship is, and it will change the images on the screen and also change some of the music. Same thing applies to people using gestures. So as they change the gestures, again, that we'll see changes on the screen in terms of where they are in the universe and as they're approaching the black hole. And again, it will alter the music. And the music that we're changing is based on Sonic Pi. So this is different from the main theme. This is music which shows the spaceship flying through a black hole, and it's created by code. And as you run the code, it creates the music. The difficulty is that Sonic Pi isn't that available. There's not that many people know about it. So I was quite surprised. Well, when I asked AI to provide some Sonic Pi code to represent a spaceship flying through a black hole, it came up with this code, which is really good. And I actually tried it out. All I've done is cut and pasted this code, put it into Sonic Pi, which is an application, and run it. And you basically hear this spaceship flying through the universe, and then as it approaches the black hole, the music changes, and then as it comes out the other side, you get another variation in the music. So I was very impressed with it, so I thought I'd show it you. So I did mention that over and above designing all the rooms, creating and designing the showcase, that are also creating a lot of management information to run the project, and we're creating management and strategy type information. Now, probably the first thing you do when you look at strategies is come up with a mission statement. So we've got a mission statement, we've got a vision statement, we have policies and principles, and all the things that you do if you're doing strategy or you're working in a business environment have actually created as part of the conversation. This is just to show you that it does actually produce a mission statement. So the Innovation Centre exists to ignite curiosity, activate creativity, and empower individuals. So it's got all the information that you'd expect on a high-level mission statement. Because I do artwork, I tend to get advertisement for artists to work on projects, and some of those projects are fairly technical projects. And this was a healthcare project in Sefton. It's a small area in Sefton. But what they were doing, they wanted artists to work alongside health professionals to come up with a campaign to do with dementia. And it was to provide awareness not only to the public on how to identify dementia and the different opportunities and what you ought to do, but also healthcare professionals like doctors. So it's to help doctors to recognise it and to look for dementia in the early stages, and then to provide advice and guidance to follow people through the dementia journey. I didn't actually apply for the job because I'm not that good an artist. So yes, I can do things using AI and I can certainly do things using digital art. But I wasn't a good fit what they wanted. But what I did do, I thought I'll have a think about this, and I'll, based on my knowledge of the types of things they're looking for, because they explained a lot of it, and also what you can do in terms of supporting people in the home. I'll just do them a quick briefing of what you could do using AI, just sort of some guidance. So I sent this to them as a sort of hopefully a briefing pack, and to do some provoke some thoughts. So this was to do with best practice for dementia campaign, used AI to work out the campaign. And then we had a storyboard poster and dementia fact sheets. And the main thing they were looking for was some sort of poster. So I didn't spend too much time on this, but basically I took all of the documentation and I fed it into AI. I presented it in a format which would enable AI to develop a poster, and it came up with this Understanding Dementia poster, a journey of awareness, action, support, which more or less tied into everything they're asking for, and that's the type of thing they wanted an artist to work on. And again, it's just showing how AI can help in coming up with a poster covering something which is very important. I then went on to think about, well, if somebody's got dementia, given what was said by the briefing papers, that you can see they want some support in the home, they want access to images and pictures and maybe some videos that remind them of what the friends and the family, and reintroduce them that they could look at on a regular basis. They need to make sure all this is very easily accessible. You're probably wanting some monitoring devices to make sure there's no problems in the home, and maybe give them a little reminder when they need to do something, such as, oh, by the way, you've not had anything to eat yet, why don't you do this? So I came up with the idea of a dementia central hub, using all the components that I'm fairly familiar with, and we worked out a scenario and explained how it all worked. What you're seeing here is an image of somebody there that's looking at an image of his grandchildren, but he's waving his hand. What he's waving his hand for, that's changing the images. So he can move his hands in different directions and the images change. He can switch things on and off. He can listen to music. He can watch the television. He doesn't need to get up and start to play with little devices which are difficult to use. All he's got to do is move his hand in certain positions and everything works. And it's a fairly simple thing to do. It's just that it's whether you've got people with the expertise to build it, and you've got people that are actually looking at doing something like this. And I just thought it was an interesting thing to send to them, and to give them sort of ideas about what you can do if you start to think about modern technology. I'll now briefly cover some of my experiences with Southport Hospital and the A&E departments in Southport. I've had 2 Achilles ruptured. I had one playing badminton, and a couple of years later, one playing pickleball. By the time of the second one, I pretty well knew what to expect, and I had a good idea of the types of exercises you were supposed to do and the exercise regimes, but also I had some awareness of the types of problems you'd experience, because the exercise regimes don't really look at the whole body. They tend to be focused on the leg that's bad. So I used the internet to find out what other information was out there from UK hospitals, and found the East Kent Hospital University had a lot of good information. I then used AI to take East Kent Hospital University's documentation and to amalgamate that with anything else it could find across the UK, not only for an exercise regime, but also I was using what's called a vacoped boot, and to see whether there's any other supporting tools or facilities that could help with the vacoped boot. And it came up with a number of things that you could use to balance your 2 legs. For example, you can put something under the opposite leg to try and balance yourself. And there was also things like little scooters you can use. So it gave me a list of things you could use that would support me in the home. And also I had a pretty comprehensive exercise routine, and I found it works extremely well. Somebody in the hospital, one of the nurses, asked me what I was looking at when I was going through my notes, I told her what it was, and she's taken those notes away, which I found quite encouraging that she found it useful. The other thing I did was an exercise while I was there, and was going to hospital quite a few times, was to look at what was happening in A&E in terms of a system. So it's just treating it as a system as I would if I was working in industry. And what I noticed was that there's quite a few things that you could be done better if you had the right resources and people had the time to look at it from a systems perspective. So again, I used A&E to say, well, looking at everything that's going on in the UK and Southport and Ormskirk Hospital, what's best practice? And also, what else can we find from other hospitals in other places in the world in terms of what they do in terms of A&E? And I put together this document, which was coming up with a proposition of things that could be looked at across Southport and Ormskirk. Weren't necessarily things you'd want to do, but it was just the start of a 10, and it was an exercise which I found quite interesting. What it did though, it gave me a far better understanding of what you could do with A&E, and I was very surprised about the level of detail it had from anything you ask it. So for example, I just asked it about A&E, and it came up with quite a comprehensive plan of best practice across A&E. We now were looking at, I mentioned a question before about, it was just a bit of a game looking at A's and I's and ethical questions about whether we share things or are we looking for dominance in the world, but most people fit into sort of a combined category. And the question for me is that if we're asking questions or we're trying to do something, we need to understand what the core principles of a company are and what its policies are and its mission statements and its visions. And when you're doing strategy, you're very much looking at this type of thing to understand where things are coming from. So if I'm looking at a company and looking at how do I completely revolutionize certain aspects of it, and how do I introduce advanced technologies, I really need to understand, what are the core principles of this company, what it's trying to move on to. I can take policies and I can change the policies depending on what's happening, what circumstances it's in, and what's happening to markets, what's happening to the industry. But you need some sort of guiding policies and principles that you're working to at any one time. So what I wanted to do was just take as an example this relocation of the children's A&E from Ormskirk to Southport and say, can we just add a little bit of an ethical perspective on this? So what I've done, I've created an ethical hub, which say it's got certain conditions on that you'd be looking for, certain things that you need to explore and to put a little bit of focus on, and then saying, if you take this into consideration, then what are the things that you would consider doing when you're looking at moving the A&E from Southport to from Ormskirk to Southport, which I put at the top there. And then it's come up with a community and cultural impact, strategic planning, ethical governance, and it's come up with a whole list of things that you might need to consider when you're looking at people that are currently disadvantaged, that could be more disadvantaged because of what's happening at Southport and Ormskirk. And then we come up with another briefing paper, just building on this, saying, well, we're looking at all the considerations of moving from Ormskirk to Southport, and you've got all the problem of travelling and what happens when people in peak hours and things like this. But also you've got the problems of the ambulance service. So the ambulance service is pretty problematic. You never know how long it's going to be when you're waiting for an ambulance, and the length of time, the delays are growing, especially with critical cases. So how would this feed into the paper to do with Ormskirk and Southport A&E? And also let's start to look at the ethics again that we came up with on our ethical hub that everything's looking at, and see what answers it comes up with. So it's looking at things like ethical foundations to do with equality, non-maleficence, justice, transparency, accountability, proportionality, and participation. And some various things come out there. And it comes up with a new briefing paper. As an exercise purely for this talk, I wanted to incorporate things that I've probably used all my life, which is a thing called capability analysis and affinity analysis, which are techniques that you use when you're looking at business systems in order to understand where the problem areas are, what their level of capability is, not individuals, but we talk about maybe a department or a business, and also what's a reasonable expectation for them to achieve. So you can look at best practice and say, well, we don't want to achieve best practice in everything, but we need a realistic target that we can work towards. And then there's a thing called affinity analysis, which means that if you've got an opportunity to maybe do 5 things, which 5 things would you do based on which capabilities would you improve, and what's the importance of those capabilities to a business. So I did the same thing for A&E, and it was really a test for AI to see if AI understood what capability analysis is, what affinity analysis is, and how you work out capability timescales. And I was pleasantly surprised that it did actually understand what I was asking it, and it came up with an example of understanding capability analysis across A&E at Southport Hospital. So it's worked out the functional areas, and it's looked at what the current capabilities are and what's an achievable target and deadlines. Now this is only an example, so I won't look at any of the figures, but it was just it was proof that AI understands some quite technical terms, and it understands some quite intricate methodologies which aren't used widely. So I was quite impressed by it. I came across this slide when I was preparing for this talk. It's something that I put together about 7 years ago, and at the time I was going through quite a few open sessions with Southport Hospital and with the Trust, and I wanted to understand how the government's overall vision fitted with the individual strategies you could see from different bodies. Now I think I don't know how many I've got. There's 6, 12, I think there's 17 individual strategies there, all with a slightly different focus. And what I found difficult to see was how they all dovetailed together, and how they integrated, and more importantly, how they tied into an overarching strategy. And the reason this is important is that if you want to look at introducing new technologies, especially something like AI, you need to understand how things fit together, because otherwise what you're going to be doing is implementing AI on a piecemeal fashion. So individual strategies of individual pieces of work are going to have their own bits of AI included within them, and they're not going to dovetail together. So in the longer term, you might find you've got disparate bits of AI that won't really meld together, and you're losing the advantage of AI, which is pulling everything together from a wide source. And it's difficult to retrofit something if you haven't really designed it in from day one. And I think we've probably still got that challenge. What I want to do now is just look a little bit deeper at the question about moving Ormskirk's Children's A&E to Southport and the implications of it. And one of the things we tend to do there as a designer, so if you're going to design this as what we call a systems change, we'd look at quite a few different use cases. So I'm going to now look at a use case and build it up. But rather than myself and a team doing this, I'm purely going to ask AI to come up with a use case. And if you were doing this in reality, you'd create a large number of these use cases. The advantage of using AI to do it is once you've got 1 or 2, then AI can sort of build on those and create more of them. And it's a lot faster than a team of people trying to do it. And the other thing you can do is that these are just scenarios that would be given to a team of people. You wouldn't actually take these as read and say, well, this is a use case. You'd say, no, these are some examples of use cases which we can build on in the team and do it incredibly fast in comparison to the normal length of time it takes to create these use cases. So here we see the agile use case, emergency action occur for a child with special needs. And the key thing about these use cases is you really need to consider people and give them names, because that makes it more real. So it starts off by saying emergency response delay for special needs child following A&E relocation. Now AI has come up with all this detail now. It's given the mother a name, it said what job she does, it's got the father, it's got the child who's 7 who's got autism and epilepsy. And I never mentioned that. AI has come up with all that. It talks about the hospital service and the dispatchers and what they're doing. It talks about the paediatric team and what they're doing. Puts the whole thing into context, talking about the distance between the two hospitals. But also what it does, it knows all the routes. So I never told it what the roads are. It knows the roads between Southport and Ormskirk, and it knows the level of congestion they've got, and it knows what time of day that it's got that level of congestion. So therefore it can work out what will happen at different times of days if you get an emergency call. And this is all exactly what you're seeing here. You can follow the conversation on the website. There's nothing made up by me. What you see at the front there, that question is the only question I asked it. And then we start to look at triggers. So it's saying Oliver experienced a prolonged seizure at 5:15 p.m. On a weekday, and Emma calls 999. Then you've got all the preconditions, what went on. It's got what's called the happy flow. So what happens if everything goes okay? It's then got an alternative flow, what happens in a more realistic scenario. And then it's got the exception flow, which is what happens if there's a disaster. And then it talks about post conditions, what the business goals are, how you can test all this, what the opportunities for improving things are. And it gives us a lot of detail then about how you could try to improve the service and ensure you get better outcomes. And it's all based on one simple question that I'd give it, which is saying, can you create a use case based on a scenario of a A&E moving from Ormskirk to Southport and a family and how they're affected by it. And now I'd like to briefly mention Heidi. The only reason I know about it is my son has been trialling it. It's an AI medical scribe for all clinicians. And basically it's an AI model that understands medical terms, and it understands the interaction between a patient and a doctor, or a patient and a consultant. So when a consultant is interviewing a patient, then it will take all the notes and it will transcribe them into a format which is easily assimilated, and it's in the format that's expected by consultants and doctors. I put this on because this I found this quite staggering when I first saw it. It's a company called NVIDIA. They make the chips that are in my computer and my desktop, which enable AI, and they were initially designed for gaming machines, and then were used by cryptocurrency because they'll handle thousands of parallel transactions. And it's ideal for doing AI. So they make all the chips, and they're one of the most valuable companies in the world. But then I went onto their website and I found they've got this available for anybody to use. And it's actually looking at proteins and protein folding. So what you do is you put a protein example such as SARS, COVID main processes here, and then you can put the amino acid sequence down, put the sequence down there, a bit more detail in it, and then it'll show you how it folds. And it's available for scientists to use. So what they're doing, they're providing these applications purely based on AI to help scientists and the medical field, which I thought was quite interesting, really, because I didn't realise they were building AI models. We're now sort of wrapping up, and I've just thrown a few extra things in that I've had a quick look at. So one was looking at Southport AI support function, a strategic blueprint. So if you are going to provide a support function for smaller businesses, what types of things would you include in it? So a lot of the work was just really simple standard things, that things I've been using, such as Microsoft 365 and Copilot. Copilot is the AI assistant, and 365 I've used later on to do the PowerPoint presentation. But you now find that AI is embedded into all the tools that are on Microsoft. 365 is Microsoft Office, and all 365 means is that every year you pay a subscription and they keep it up to date all the time. So as all the new advancements come into AI, you'll automatically get them in your version of Microsoft Office. If you just bought Microsoft Office, then you wouldn't get all the AI things that are coming through constantly. But it just talks about basically the types of things you need to consider when you set up a support organisation within Southport for smaller businesses. And I think we'll call it a day after this one. This again is just like a throwaway. I thought I'd spend half an hour looking at conference centres. I've been to a lot of conferences. I've talked at a few. I use them both to bring my teams together, and we'd have sort of a working session for a couple of days sometimes, or you'd have different types of technology conferences. So I've got a reasonable idea of what they're trying to achieve there. I've also been to quite a few international conference centres. And I wanted to look at what we would do in Southport if we're building this conference centre. So part of it is to do with looking at if you're developing a major programme and you want to build some sort of infrastructure. Well, how are you going to manage the infrastructure in the future? So you'd probably use AI to manage the infrastructure. But what you need to be doing then is producing your documents in such a way that AI knows all about them and could help you to come up with a maintenance regime. You've got the running of the conference centre itself. So you've got to understand, well, how do I manage conferences? You've got the speakers. So the speakers might want to understand what the public or the organisations coming to the conference, what they're looking for. So you might have chatbots. So there's all different aspects of a conference centre, far wider than purely using AI within the conference centre as a subject area. So I've gone through all those, and it took me, I didn't want to spend more than half an hour. I actually went over my target and spent 40 minutes on this. But I was conversing with AI, looking at all the things you might want to do if you're going to build a conference centre for the future that would be AI driven in terms of this major program you're doing. It'd be AI capable in terms of managing all the individual conferences and whatever's going on, but also it would provide this interface into the public and people that are coming to the conferences, so that you'd have this chatbot which was tied into everything, and you do all the advertising, it'd be all geared, so the whole thing would be AI enabled. And to do that, you need to start thinking about it now, because if you don't build it now, it's going to be very difficult and very costly to build in the future. So that was just a fairly quick exercise. I suppose we're coming to the end of the talk now. It really depends how much time I've got left, whether I cover this or not. But this is AISDO, which was mentioned earlier on in the talk between the AI and our local politician, where the AI was explaining what it was. Now, it was a conversation I started off that was purely going to last a couple of days, maybe up to a week, trying to work out with AI how you could build a governance structure across a major company that was going to govern advanced technologies and particularly AI. Once I'd actually got this rolling, I suddenly realised that maybe we could widen the scope. So initially it was to do with a water company, and then started to think, well, water company and electricity companies are very similar. And this is just one part of the electricity company. They're looking at the electricity networks, works very, very similar fashion to water companies. And then moved on to expand it out into saying, well, if we understand how to do this group for one company, why can't we create a group that sits across all of the water companies? And the idea is that possibly the government or another organisation organisation can sit across water companies in the same way as the regulator does. And they provide some level of governance, but also they'd encourage the water companies to work together, particularly in the introduction of AI, whereas different companies could develop different models based on the requirements of water and share those with other participating members. And that's really the basis of it. I mean, we've got electricity in there as well, where it's similar to water. And then it grew a little bit to thinking, well, possibly we could include the NHS and local authorities where they've got similar requirements. So obviously it's a different business, but some of the requirements look very similar if you look at it from a systems point of view. It then went on to sort of say, well, we're developing this. How do we build up this team? What capabilities do we need? How does the governance team work with the businesses, and what members they need, what capabilities they need? How's it all going to fit together? Now, the whole thing probably took quite a few months. It was maybe 3 or 4 months to do this. And if you take an extract of the conversation, which is fully recorded on the Innovation Centre website, you can see all of my questions that I've raised with AI, and you can see all the responses. So everything's fully documented, so you can follow it all through. And if you cut that and paste it into a Word document, it's probably about 150 pages long. So it's quite a large, extensive document. And it came up with 3 briefing papers. So one briefing paper that talked about how we could create this governance organisation across the utilities. A second paper looked a little bit more widely, and it was saying, well, if you wanted to build up the capabilities to introduce AI, and you could do this anywhere really, then what sort of capabilities we'd need and how would you pull them together? And the third paper talked about the issues of introducing advanced technologies across the UK, given the fact that in the past what we've been doing is building up a certain level of capability and then losing that capability as we tend to outsource things. So lots of things in the UK are outsourced to foreign businesses. So we asked them to do a lot of the technical work, and we start to lose our capabilities. So there's 3 papers in there. So AISDO, large conversation, lots of documents, lots of communications documents which you could send as briefing papers to executives. There's strategies, vision statements, policies, principles, everything you'd need to develop a proposition. So this is a proposition, and it's purely done as an example to understand the capabilities of AI in helping to produce what's a very detailed, comprehensive and complex proposition for a major industry. And this, what you see here now in this picture, is one of the images it's produced, because not only do I ask it to produce lots of management information, technical designs, but also to produce these information documents or information images. And this one's talking about AISDO, which stands for AI Strategy Delivery Organisation, as though there's not, and we're assuming that there's this delivery organisation that sits across maybe a group of water utilities. And it's talking about, this is our moment to do things. And the reason it says this is our moment, the key thing about this is that we see the UK being a world leader in this. So you can't really expect the UK to be world leaders in the provision of AI assistants, such as Google are doing, and Microsoft and ChatGPT, or really the development of advanced technologies that you see with people like NVIDIA, the chip manufacturers, and also the major data centers. But we are excellent at producing methodologies and developing advanced technologies within our companies, and that's the type of thing that we could sell internationally. So this talks about how we could do all that, how we could become world leaders, And again, it's all based on ideas which a lot of people understand, and I'm assuming that a lot of people would have done years ago had we had the capability to do it. And to gain those capabilities, you need AI. So AI will actually help you to position things and rethink about things and challenge some of your assumptions. And this is just one of the documents you can see here that it's come up with. So I mentioned that the conversation covering AI-SDO and also the initial introduction of the governance of AI in a water company is fully documented on the website, and this is the drop-down list where you can find it. So it's under AI, which is the overarching heading there, and then you can see from the drop-down list that we've got the water company innovation, which covers the introduction of this governance organisation within a water utility. And then we've got AI-SDO, and there's quite a large document there covering the whole of the conversation, which is basically the 3 months of ongoing conversation with AI, with lots of documents, lots of images. We've got plenty of communications documents, briefing documents, strategy documents, program management documents. So more or less everything you need if you're coming up with a proposition, a detailed proposition, which is going to be fairly significant. So all of that is covered within this conversation with AI. And what AI is doing, I'm more or less describing the types of things that I need to produce, and then it's pulling it all together and producing the first cut of a document. So it's doing an awful lot of the donkey work, and it's also verifying some of my thoughts on this. And it's incredibly fast in comparison to how long this would take. An individual couldn't really do this in a reasonable sort of time at all. It's not really viable. But given you can use AI, then it's very achievable. And if you have a team of people, then they could do something really comprehensive and very effective, whereas this is more or less an example of what AI can do. And you can see there that we've got briefing papers, communication papers. We've got another paper, which is the briefing paper on UK AI capability. How do you develop capability across AI? So what do we mean by AI capability? How many people are going to be involved in it? What skills do they need? And how do we grow it? And then finally, there's the report on saying, how do we provide this support and governance organisation across AI and ensure that we grow our capabilities, but retain those capabilities rather than using third parties or consultancy groups from foreign countries to develop all that work for us. And then, yes, we've introduced things into businesses, but we've lost all the capability in being able to support ourselves to do it. And this is just a simple diagram that AI came up with to explain how everything fits together. So there's nothing particularly complicated there. The only thing I would say is if you actually look at the documentation behind it, it's looking at a thing called a use case, whereby you're looking at individual problems to do with water and electricity and looking at how these are resolved in a lot of detail. So a lot of the issues the companies are currently having, it focuses in on those. So there's a lot of detail behind these high level documents here. So when we look at the documentation that I've just covered in very, very quickly, there's a tremendous amount of documentation behind it. There's a lot of papers that we've used AI to write executive summaries, briefing papers, detailed technical design papers, papers that talk about how governance will work and the types of methods that need to be integrated into this. But also, it starts to think more widely about the issues facing the UK in terms of delivering AI into major businesses. So I produced 2 additional papers just following on from what we were doing there. The first one was to do with reweaving the fabric of saying, why the UK must lead in AI business systems capability. And by the fabric, I mean, if you look at a business and the way a business operates, you've got business systems, you've got IT technology systems, you've got this concept of data, information, knowledge, and intelligence, which is another layer of fabric. And there's about 9 different levels of fabric. And you've also got 6 different areas of AI adoption. So it brings all these out and says, if you understand how all these fit together, then you can start to become a world leader in the introduction of AI. The second paper really is saying that if the UK had to do one thing to turn around what's been happening in terms of its loss of capability in advanced technology, then what would you do? And this is an executive summary that covers certainly the things that I've been involved in and know about to do with advanced IT infrastructure and the management across major companies. We know at the end of the talk, there's a few extra slides following, but they're just like an explanation, a little bit of detail about what AI is, how I do artwork, and how I've created some of the images and a little bit about the technology. But that's just some additional information if anybody wants it, or if I do have a lot of extra time, then I might look at 1 or 2 of the things on there. But as I think now, as far as the talk's concerned, I've more or less come to the end of it, and just about reasonably tightly in terms of hitting the deadline for the end of the talk. Thanks very much if anybody's still listening. I might have mentioned that I do a bit of graphical art. I also produce books for the grandchildren. And one of the things I do is I have books and I have pictures in there, and I've got this concept of a never-ending story. So as well as creating the books, I create a lot of images which can be put together to create a story, and you can actually just talk through the stories with the children. And this one is Alice walking through a random forest. So some of the things I do are a lot more technical than you might expect. And I say, if you're talking to a child, it's just Alice walking through the forest, and she's on an adventure now. As far as you're concerned, it tells you everything you need to know about AI. Well, not everything, but quite a lot. So we have Alice, and what she's doing, she's walking through some irises. Now, when people first started to learn about AI, if you go to university and learn about AI, one of the first things they teach you about, and this is traditional AI, is irises. And the early AI systems could recognize different types of irises based on variables about them. It's all text based, so it's it might be the color of them, the radiated color. It might be the width of certain aspects of it, and the dimensions and the shapes and various things like that. And what you do is you feed lots of information into an AI algorithm, and what it does, it starts to understand what's going on and what's important, and it creates a new algorithm you can use. So you give it, out of a lot of days, you might give it 80% and hold 20% back. And it learns how to produce an algorithm to determine what type of iris it is. You then feed the next 20% in, again, you know the answers, and it tells you what it believes those irises are. And then it can work out how many it's got right, because you know the answers. So it can say, well, this algorithm is 80% accurate, or it's 90% accurate, or whatever. And then you know you've got an algorithm that works. And that's one of the first things people tend to learn about. Random forests, or a traditional type of AI that does analysis, so analyzes data. Now, a lot of companies a couple of years ago were using this all the time. So Viola, for example, was I think they had a workshop in Liverpool, and they were talking about how much they were going to change in the company based on AI. A lot of the AI they were working on at the time was all based on random forests. And this is a way of analysing data and bringing new insights about what was happening in the company. The image itself is the generative AI. So it's generated this image, so you've got that there. I use fractal graphics, so you'll see fractal graphics in the top, which come together, which is all to do with chaos theory. And then the girl has a little badge on the shoulder, which is my chaos butterfly, which is all to do with chaos theory and the butterfly effect, which I translated from a book. So I changed the code on that. So this image, even though it's just for a simple picture for children, has got an awful lot of science behind it, and it used quite a lot of science in generating it. So for example, I had to write the code to create the butterfly. I had to use fractal graphics to create the fractals, which created the sky. And I say most of the other stuff I put in using digital art and using AI. So these are just a few extra things that I've stuck on the end, which probably won't be covering at the talk anyway, but I just thought I'd cover a few things that I tend to do. So this is one of my images, so I'll just go through this. It's got a little song attached to it.
Dust in the air weighs heavy on my skin, whispers of ghosts where life had been. Shadows and ruins stretch endlessly wide, yet there's a spark, a pulse.
So this image is part of a set of... I think we stopped it now. So this image is part of a number of images. It's a group of images all to do with life. So this one's called The Breath of Life. So I've got, I say, a number, and they've all got stories attached to them. They're all fairly complex in designing the artwork, and each one has got some lyrics and a song. So this one is a little bit different now, and again, it's one of my... It's an image, but it's not the type of thing I tend to do. I have only done this as an experiment with AI. So I've actually got somebody here that's doing two paintings at once. One painting is a traditional one, another one is very modern. With a modern city, it's got a robot and it's got a train. And it's also got my chaos butterfly and things like that. But the key thing about it is this has been generated by AI, in the sense that AI produced the picture, but the train and the robot didn't exist on the original picture. So what I've done, I've built a magic wand, and the magic wand is based on a microprocessor that runs AI. So if you move this in the right directions and the right shapes in 3D, it actually understands what you're doing because it's got an AI model built into it. And then when it recognizes a certain movement, it will then introduce the train and the robot. And the things it uses are, it's got a thing which I've got here, which is called an Arduino microprocessor that runs what's called tiny machine learning, and it uses TensorFlow, which is a fairly common method of doing AI. But the thing is, it's tiny, so it's a very tiny processor, and it's the type of thing which you put on what's called edge computing with AI, whereby you want something to run for years on a battery without having to change the battery. So it only sort of comes on when it recognizes something, and it uses a very, very small AI model. So it's incredibly small, the amount that it uses. It uses virtually no processing power. Again, there's my magic wand. You've got the code here, and you've got the code there as well. And then at the bottom there, because it's talking to my computer screen, you can actually see on it the code. You can see the magic wand that you can move there, and you can see a little diagram of the image that it's making. The interesting thing about images is that when you're talking about very small machines like this, there's no difference between sound, vision and motion. They're basically all the same, because what's happening is that as you move something in a certain direction and motion, it creates an image, and it's that image that AI learns about. And the same thing with sound. So you've got a sound coming through, it recognizes the sound, creates a bit of an image, and then AI recognizes the image. Now this is edge computing we're talking about. Very small microprocessors doing it. This is not how the traditional AI works. It's far more sophisticated, but this is very, very small models working on very small, incredibly small devices that take virtually no power. And again, just an extra thing for this for the talk. I won't be covering this at the actual talk, but this is one of my favourite pictures actually, because what it's got on the all the flowers and the vases and things like that are all created by fractal graphics or by chaos theory and maths. It's not actually using a real photographs. Some of them are using a little tiny bit of AI just to change the shape slightly, but most of them aren't. I was doing some citizen science at the time, so I was teaching I was teaching AI to recognise pollinators in the Arctic, which sounds grand, but it's anybody can do this. You're given lots and lots of images, and you have to say whether it's a pollinator or maybe it's a bit of dust or whatever, and then that helps AI to learn what they are. And then in the Arctic, they then have a camera using AI, which is recognising pollinators. So you can count the number of pollinators over a certain surface area, so we can see whether they're declining or they're increasing. There's lots of other things on here. We've got my chaos butterfly there. We've got a cat that's both inside and outside. Yeah, this is my cat theory. That's a photograph of a cat, by the way, Kokomo. But AI just changed it a bit, and it's opened its eyes. The girl doesn't actually exist. The couch and a lot of other things are purely photographs. And I've got a book there which started off as a 3D printed image that I added some electronics to called the Edge, which was used in a tail, and then I took that image and superimposed it onto a book, and then I've written the book, so that book actually exists. So there's quite a lot in there. I quite like that. It's just yeah, we're talking about the image before, and I was saying that the first image we looked at, where you could see Aria and a sort of a jungle scene. It's what I was doing there was I had some for earlier images that I created, and I wanted to change the image, so I wanted to create a new image of my robot face, or it's the woman's face called Aria. And I want to do it with the grandkids. So what we did was I used fractal graphics to create the images you can see on the screen, and then we produced a little robot. So we built just out of Lego. It's called an EV3, but you can run simple Lego on a robotics. In fact, you can do very sophisticated robotics with Lego on the earlier robotics kits. So it just turned a handle, poured some paint, and it did some paint pouring. Yeah, we can see there that it's poured the paint, which is on the top left-hand corner, and you can see the whole thing morphing as it goes through different iterations of digital art and AI to create the central figure. And then we've got all these shapes around the outside, which are all to do with code. But I changed that because it was called the breath of life, and I wanted to catch somebody's breath. So I used my wife's breath. So she breathed on a sensor. We introduced that into the code, and it's changed the design and the colours of the shape behind it. And we've now come to the end, and I just find this quite amusing. So this is it's a little electronics board, an Arduino board, and it just so happens it's got somebody blowing on it looks like a heated component there, and I say this was all to do with the breath of life, and this is the sensor I used for my wife to breathe on it to capture her breath that fed into the image that and changed the colours and the shapes of some of the background images, and that fed into other images. So what I tend to do, I mix art and science, and so it's a very long-winded way of creating an image, but I find it quite interesting, and it certainly helps you to think differently and be more innovative in the types of things you do. And that was one of the concepts behind the Innovation Centre, not to do anything as sophisticated as this, but for people to start to think about when they're creating artwork and they're using science, don't just do an image of some sort of scientific thing on the artwork. Use quite sophisticated science to actually create the artwork, and you can do this for very small children as well. They can be doing very simple science which creates artwork by using Scratch to do the artwork, and that's then use AI on top of that, and we can then start to mix science, AI and art, and we can do some quite amazing images and create nice songs and stories and whatever by combining art, science and AI. And thank you very much if anybody's still listening.